Good morning, Kensington, Orion. I'm Charlotte, and I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to our stream service this morning, where we're going to be finishing up in our series called Personified. So we're looking at the life of Jesus leading up to next week, which is our Easter celebration. So thanks for being here today. By the way, Easter is next weekend. If you are planning to be here in person, make sure you go online and reserve your free tickets. We have 2 Good Friday services. We have 5 Easter services. 2 of them will be on Saturday and 3 will be on Sunday. So go ahead to our website and you're going to find how to get your free tickets to reserve a spot for those in-person services, or we'll see you on the stream. Also next weekend, families, we are looking forward to a video that K-Kids is putting out for kids to engage in next weekend. So be watching for that as well. And if you are not on our Facebook group, please go there and check it out, because Orion has a Facebook group where we hang out after the stream service and we chat about what we took away from the service each week, and we just hang out, and I'd love to see you there. I'm going to be there today, and I'd love to see you on our Facebook group after service. Plus, you can find out just, you know, what's going on around here. We connect because we can't always be together in person right now. So thanks for being here, and enjoy Craig's message today as we honor Palm Sunday.
Hey, welcome to Kensington Church. Whether you're joining us in person or at one of our Michigan campuses or online anywhere, we're thrilled that you've chosen to spend this Sunday morning with us. My name is Craig McGlasson. I'm the lead pastor at our Orion campus. And first of all, I just want to thank everyone involved in planning and presenting last weekend's Move Out gathering. It was hands down an incredible event. One of the things that I think ignited our hearts at that was the reality and the idea to love humanity like God does. So we heard from speakers within the Kensington community like Danny Cox and Craig Mays. We also had guest speakers like Chuck Mingo and Troy Jackson from Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. And I will tell you that for me personally, one of the things that stuck out the most was actually the opening night when Craig Mays gave an incredible challenge to all of us and left me and my wife walking away with the idea that we have asked ourselves since then, which is God's question to us: who do I have as we look around this world for people to serve? I'm so grateful that this took place, because honestly, it shows Kensington's heart to meet the needs of all kinds around us. Okay, so I'm passionate about what I'm about to share right now. In fact, I would say more than passionate, I've based my whole life on the work that I'm about to say to you. And it's this: God is calling us to new life. And if that sounds like Easter, it's because it is. Because it wasn't isolated to that specific day and only to Jesus, the Son of God. His voice is still calling us to come out of the tomb you're in and live. So I'm excited about this year's Good Friday and Easter service at Kensington. It's true that we'll pull out all the stops like we usually do, and we have this pool of unbelievable talent and creativity that we're going to bring to you in a memorable service this year. But that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what God did and is still frankly doing. Guys, this Easter represents the most hope-giving, life-changing story that there is. So please make sure to join us. Our Good Friday and Easter services are offered in person at each of our campuses and of course online as well. Here's what you need to do though. You're gonna need to reserve your tickets at kensingtonchurch.org/Easter and invite your family, your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors, and get everybody there you can to join us. It's one more thing though. If your family plans to stream the Easter service, then we have something special planned for the kids. Our creative K-Kids team has put together a video message that's just for them. And it includes a hands-on craft, a zany original television broadcast that includes an Easter explosion and a running pineapple. So you're gonna have to tune in to see what that's all about. But most importantly, it's an age-appropriate explanation of the resurrection of Jesus. So watch it during the Easter weekend at kensingtonchurch.org/Easter. All right, so here we go. Ready for today's service. We are in the 7th week of the series Personified, which has been, frankly, a powerful series for me and I believe for so many of us to bring us up to Good Friday and Easter. All right, so here we go. With all the details of Easter and Good Friday, now we're going to start today's service. And we are in the 7th week of a series called Personified, which I can tell you in all honesty has been a powerful series for me, as I really do believe it's been for so many of the rest of us as we're literally moving right into Good Friday and Easter. Today we're going to be talking about is the unfairness that Jesus experienced, but also how his grace itself to us really isn't fair. In the setting that we're going to find Jesus in today, you have this angry mob that chooses to release a criminal rather than Jesus. Not fair. But more importantly, Jesus chose to take my place. He wasn't a victim. He was a willing replacement for me and for you when he went to the cross. Also not fair. But that's what makes what he did such a beautiful act of sacrificial love.
Well, good morning, everyone. Let's have everybody stand up as we worship Jesus this morning.
You have a way of taking disappointment, making it an anthem of hope. You have a way of opening the promise, even when the door is still closed. It's what you do, it's who you are. You are like a wildfire in the dark. It's how you move, it's how you work. You can change the whole thing with one word. Light, let there be light. Open my eyes, let there be light. You have a way of coming with a breakthrough, even when I run out of time. You are my hero, moving to the rescue. Moving at the speed of light. Let there be light. Open my eyes. Let there be light. Light. Let there be light. Open my eyes. Let there be It's what you do, it's who you are. You are like a wildfire in the dark. It's how you move, 'cause it's your heart. You are like a million burning stars. It's what you do, it's who you are. You are like a wildfire in the dark. It's how you move, 'cause it's your heart. You are like a million burning stars. Light, let there be light. Open my eyes, let there be light.
on, we sing, see the tomb. See the tomb where he lay. See the stone rolled away. He is risen, he is risen, he's alive. Yeah. See his hands, see his feet, touch his scars and believe. He is risen, he is risen, he's alive. Oh, he's alive. He lives. When you sing, all honor and power are his. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus lives. Hear the shackles breaking free. Hear the song of the redeemed. He is moving, he is moving, he's alive. So take this freedom, take this love. Can you feel it rising up? He is here, he is here, he's alive. Oh, he lives. All honor and power are his. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus, oh, he lives. All honor and power are his. All glory forever. Amen. Jesus lives. Oh, Jesus lives. Yeah. Oh, he lives. Oh, you took all our shame, left it in the grave. We're forgiven. Oh, we're forgiven. The work forever done, only by the blood. It is finished. Oh, it is finished. Yeah, you took all our shame, left it in the grave. We're forgiven. Oh, we're forgiven. Oh, the work forever done, only by the blood. It is finished. Oh, it is finished. Oh, he lives. All honor and power are his. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus, oh, he lives. All honor and power are his. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus lives. Oh, Jesus lives. Yeah. Yeah, he is risen. He is risen. He's alive.
Stay up for just a minute, would you? I was thinking as I was sitting there this morning how, man, our band is amazing, and sometimes it can be a little intimidating to walk up because I don't have what they have. I don't have a voice like they have. If I tried to sing like Matthias, I'd hurt all of us, myself included. I don't have an instrument like they have. I don't have musical ability like they have. But here's what I've been thinking all week and just felt it so strong this morning. What I do have is what we all have this morning. What I have is this book and the song that it sings. And this book sings the most incredible song of all creation. You'd never make a mistake to misbelieve that this is a song. And it sings about a villain who rivals all villains. It sings about a hero who defines heroism. It is a song that sings about beauty and perfection and brokenness. It's a song that sings about pain and suffering, loss and desire, design. It's a song that sings about redemption and hope reborn. And it's a song that we're going to try and understand the lyrics of in a different way today than maybe we have before, and a story that we have heard, but my prayer all week long has been for myself and for you that God would do something to press this song into our ears and into our hearts in a whole new way today. So are you ready to hear it with me? All right, let's go ahead and have a seat. So some of you are probably familiar with what this typical Sunday typically represents and the message that you're accustomed to hearing on a Sunday like this. This is, what Sunday do we call this in the church? Anybody know? Palm Sunday, of course. So you're used to hearing a message probably about Jesus' final entry into Jerusalem. This last couple of weeks, sitting at the dinner table one day, my wife and I, Nicole, were having a conversation with our kids, and we're like, hey, Easter's coming and Good Friday's coming. And so we're just talking to them about it. I've got two 14-year-old daughters, or twins, and I got our 18-year-old son. And so we're just chatting. They've all grown up in church their whole life. And we just said, hey, so again, what is Easter about? Oh, there's Easter. And what's Good Friday about? And here's Good Friday. And we go, and then there's Palm Sunday that precedes it all. It's like the Sunday that kicks us into the Holy Week. And what's Palm Sunday about? And one of my daughters looks at me and goes, oh, I know. That's when everybody started crying out loud, Ohana, Ohana. I'm like, no, babe, that's Lilo and Stitch. That's a whole nother story. That's a cartoon. And in that moment, my wife and I locked eyes. We're like, we have failed. We have failed. Hosanna will never be forgotten in our home again, what that phrase is all about. But here's the thing. We're not going to have the typical Palm Sunday message today. And if you've been with us for any length of the 7 weeks that we have been in this series, you understand why. But for some of you that maybe you're just tuning in online or you're just joining us, maybe for the first week at the tail end of the series, let me explain to you why. For 7 weeks now, we have been in a series, Personified. It has been an attempt on our part to walk with Jesus chronologically in the last week or so of his life. To try to understand what it means that the scriptures tell us that our God became a human being, and when he did so, somehow in a way that is mind-blowing, he wrapped his full deity into full humanity, meaning everything that you and I would experience and feel and lament in the moments that he went through is exactly what he went through. So betrayal affected him the same way it would affect us. Physical pain affected him the same way it would affect us. Emotional pain the same way. Mental trauma, the same way, like all of it affected him. And so one of the things that we have wanted to do leading into Easter is literally walk with Jesus in the chronological moments that led him up to the cross. And so week 2 is actually when we looked at Palm Sunday, which would have fallen in line with Jesus' move towards the cross in his last week. And so this morning, where we're going to find ourselves is really one of his last relational encounters before he moves to the cross, before he will be nailed on Friday, and before he will resurrect that we will celebrate next Sunday. And in this moment, there's so many different ways that you could explain it and describe it, and some of you are probably familiar with the story, maybe some of you loosely, and maybe some of you have never heard of it before, but it is the story of Barabbas, a story of a moment in some of Jesus' final hours where he stands in court being tried next to a man who has already been tried and found guilty. And it's a moment where they change places, essentially. And it's a moment that you could describe in so many different ways, and I think for us this morning, the way I want us to sit in to understand Jesus' humility and the impact of this moment on him is that it is a horribly unfair moment. We've all had unfair moments, but there is, I think, arguably no more unfair moment than the perfect God of creation being tried as a guilty sinner who has broken law, who has harmed humanity, and who is worthy of death. And I think in this moment, you don't just see, here's what's interesting, and we'll watch this throughout the morning, you don't just see an unfairness demonstrated to Jesus, but frankly, an unfairness demonstrated from Jesus. As a matter of fact, if you've ever thought to yourself that God is unfair, hear me, you're absolutely right. And it's one of the best things about him. So I just want to pray and ask that he would help us to make much sense of a story that for some of us is so familiar, and for some of us that maybe we've never heard, but for all of us, I think we need it to speak to us today. So let me pray. Father in heaven, I am mindful of what my friend Chris just reminded all of us of a few hours ago this morning, that the resurrection is not just something you did, it is who you are. And so, God, I am aware that we will celebrate next week your triumph over the grave. That we just sang, you are risen, and yet the truth is, you are no less risen today than you will be next week. And so you, God, who are resurrection, not just do resurrection, would you breathe a sense of life and resurrection into the places in us that need it today? Places of despair or frustration or hopelessness or fear or brokenness or doubt. Wherever there is a place that needs life breathed into it today, I pray that you would do that. And I pray that you would give us the ears and the heart to be able to hear beyond the physical, to feel beyond the physical, what it is that you, Jesus Christ, went through when you, our God, became one of us, when you, our Creator, became our sacrifice. And help us, I pray, to move with you, to appreciate you in a different way for what you went through on our behalf. And that you didn't experience it simply as God, but you allowed yourself to experience it as a human being. All the pain of it, all the sadness of it, and all the emotion of it. And then would you also, I pray, let us not just lean into your humanity to appreciate you and love you more, but to find your humanity instructing our humanity and leading us. And so, God, I kneel before you, who is the King of all things, the senior most pastor of this church and every church, and ask that you would be to us a good father this morning, and let us understand and hear your voice. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want, before we go any further into the story, I do want to take a second and just take up our offering this morning and acknowledge a couple of things. One, how much we just continue to appreciate all of you who help make everything that we accomplish at Kensington possible because of your generosity, because of your willingness to open your hands, not so much to Kensington, but to Jesus. And so we appreciate that. We thank you for that. And I also want to say this, for those of you that maybe have never participated in these moments with us, we'd love to have you join us in this. Like, I would shamelessly say, this is one of the greatest things that you can do with your resources that God has given you, is to contribute it back in part to the work of the kingdom, reaching people with the love, with the real tangible efforts of love, as well as the mission of love, knowing that there is a God, his name is Jesus, and he's wild about all of us. And all of that happens because of moments like this. So if you're a part of that with us, or if you want to be a part of that with us, you can do it in a couple different ways. On the screen tells all of them, through texting, through the app. You can also even go to our website and drop something in the buckets on the way out if you'd like to do that. But just want to thank you so much, because all of this moment here that happens across all of our campuses is what creates everything that we're able to do throughout the course of this next year to serve the King and his kingdom. So I want to play a little bit of a kind of a trivia with you this morning to get started. Kind of a true-false trivia about yours truly. So I'm gonna say a phrase, I'm gonna say a statement, and I want you to tell me if you think it's true or false. True will be a show of hands. So if you think it's true, just raise your hand up. So here's a statement. I was once arrested for fleeing the scene of a hit-and-run accident. How many think it's true? Okay. So most of you think I am a lot better than I actually am. All right, so here's what happened. This is actually a true statement. So I was in high school. I think I was in my junior or senior year, and I was putting in job applications. So I'm driving all around, dropping in applications in several different places. And one of the places I put in an application was to Blockbuster Video. Anybody remember Blockbuster Video? Some of you are like, what is Blockbuster Video? So I put in an application at Blockbuster, and I'm backing out of the parking space. And so this is what happened. There's a car right next to me, and we were so tight to each other that as I turned out of the space, my bumper hit their bumper, like just barely. No exaggeration. It was just kind of a little graze. I mean, didn't even shake the car or anything. I could look out my windshield. I could see there was nothing on their bumper, so I assumed there's nothing on mine. So I'm like, I'm not going to stop. I didn't see that there was somebody in the car, so I thought, I'm just going to go. So I continue my backup. I'm 2 cities away from where I live, and I start driving home. On the way home, I passed the street just before my street, and I noticed that there was a police officer sitting right at the end. And so, of course, I'm paying attention to that. I slow down a little bit. I check my speedometer, make sure I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to be. There's no phones at this point in your car, so I didn't have to worry about whether or not I had a phone in my car, and so in my hand. So I turned down my street, and I noticed as I turned down my street, he's pulled out of the street before, and now he's following me. And so I get about 5 houses from my house, and he lights me up. Whoop. And I'm like, oh no, come on. So I finish the 4-house drive to my driveway, and I pull into my driveway, and he pulls right in behind me. And he gets on his loudspeaker, and he tells me, stay in the car. Now, this is broad daylight. So there's neighbors outside, they're watching, I'm immediately embarrassed, but here's what happens in my mind. My brother-in-law is a retired police officer right now from the Southfield Police Department, who had told me on a number of occasions that he had a good friend that was a police officer in the city I grew up in, and that at some point he was gonna use that guy to pull a prank on me. So I'm thinking, that's what's happening. I'm like, oh, I know this, because it literally did not dawn on me that this could have anything to do with what just happened at Blockbuster. That's already like faded out of my memory. It was such an insignificant moment. And so I'm thinking, there's no way I'm gonna let Dennis get me on this one. I'm gonna totally go with this, and I'm gonna lean into it, and I'm gonna be a complete jerk to this cop. Like, he's not winning. So he says, stay in the car. So I get out of my car, and I slam my door, and I'm like, why do I have to stay in the car? And then he gets out of the car, and there's 2 of them. And the one that gets out of the driver's side, we'll just say he had small man syndrome. He's a short, stocky cop, and immediately goes to like level 10. The other guy, a little bit taller, not small man syndrome, he kind of keeps it cool. He's actually trying to calm down his partner a little bit. But the small guy comes running up to me, and he just gets right in my face. And so I'm like, oh, all right, he wants to play. So he's gonna take it to the next level. I'm gonna take it to the next level. And I just matched his intensity for intensity. And I start yelling back at him, and I start pointing my finger at him, and he's yelling at me, and he says, you were just in an accident. And so now I know it's a joke. Because I'm like, I wasn't just in an accident. You gotta come up with a better lie than that. And I'm like, there's no way I was in an accident. Maybe you were in an accident. And I'm being a total smart mouth. So here was one of the problems. About 2 months earlier, I had kind of wrapped too hard around one of those those metal or cement pylons in a parking lot, and I totally caved in the wheel well on the passenger side of my car, same side I just hit with the bumper. And so the other officer's looking at it, he goes, oh yeah, we got damage over here. But here's the thing, it's totally rusted. So I'm thinking, come on, man, there's no way you think that that's from something that just happened tonight. It's got rust on it. So everything has led me up to this point to believe this is 100%, there's no question in my mind, it's a joke. So now I start yelling back at him. And I say to him, and this is where it all changes, how would you like it if I arrested you for harassing me? Before I know it, I don't even know how he did it. Maybe this is a move they learned in the department. I'll have to ask my brother. He's a cop in Jersey. But he grabs my wrist, spins me around, and slams me face down into the hood of my car. I could feel the blood just running down my chin. And that's where I'm laying on the hood of my car, and I go, this isn't a joke, is it? He's like, this is not a joke, bleep, bleep, bleep. Then next thing I know, I'm handcuffed, and I'm in the back of his car. And I'm sitting in the back of his car, and I'm like, oh boy. I still haven't even thought about the thing at Blockbuster yet. It's just not dawning on me. So I can hear them on their radio talking to the partner or talking to the other department over in Lincoln Park. And they're going back and forth trying to understand the nature of what happened, understand the damage on the other vehicle, the damage on my vehicle. My mom even comes out in the middle of this. She does the mom thing. She's crying. She's, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. To no avail, he sends her back in the house. And now I'm totally alone. I'm like, my mom got shooed away. And so this goes on for several minutes. And finally they realize, talking to the officer at the scene, because these are 2 different departments, based on the accident, or based on the damage on their vehicle, the damage on mine, that nothing happened. That my damage is not from that, and they can't even find anything on this woman's vehicle. There's not, like I said, not even a scuff. So finally, the nicer officer comes and gets me out of the car, and he takes the handcuffs off, and he says to me what to this day has become some of the most beautiful words I've ever heard when he said, you are free to go. And I was like, whoo. Here's what's really crazy. 3 weeks later, so I grew up in kind of the hood. And in my neighborhood, we constantly put basketball hoops up. A lot of times they were literally milk crates just tacked into telephone poles. And sometimes there were actual hoops that were in telephone poles. And so the police officers would often come and pull them down. So 3 weeks later, no lie, that same cop, little man, was using a metal baton to beat down one of the basketball hoops on a local telephone pole in the middle of a storm. He got struck by lightning. Yeah. And I was like, Jesus got you. I actually thought that for a hot minute. So here's the crazy thing. I go through that whole experience, and I will tell you, even after they took the chains off of me, the handcuffs, if you will, there was legitimately a form of chains that I felt like I was still strapped in. Chains of embarrassment, kind of handcuffs of anger and frustration. And honestly, I think all of it culminated into a sense of being bound up in bitterness. I think that's why there was a certain broken part of my heart that even celebrated a little bit when he got struck by lightning. Now, thankfully, he recovered and he was fine and he ended up back doing his job. But there was this broken part of me that got happy when that happened because of this bitterness that started to lock me up. Whether or not you have been arrested, whether or not you've ever been in handcuffs, every single one of us know what it's like to be bound up, to be chained up, to be locked up by something that you feel powerless to do anything about. Because that was one of the weirdest moments for me, is that moment that I realized this is for real, and I'm in handcuffs, and I am absolutely powerless to do anything about this situation. Even the greatest power in my life that I knew at that point, my mom and dad, could do nothing for me. And some of you have been in those moments. Some of you are in a moment like that right now. And I think those moments where we're locked up, chained up, and we have tried to break it to no avail can come in all kinds of forms: addictions and habits, broken relationships, even things in our mind that we wish were just different in how we thought and our perspective and our outlook. But I think probably one of the most powerful things that has a tendency to lock us up, to chain us up, is bitterness. And this is a story today that we're going to lean into with Jesus in his last relational encounter before the cross. It's all about a moment of change. So to give you a little bit of context, to set the scene, kind of the backdrop, if you will, Luke chapter 23 is where we're going to go. So if you want to get there before I do, feel free to take a minute and do that. Before we get there, so here's some of the backdrop. Year is 33 AD. The setting is Jerusalem. It's a time in history when Rome basically had its thumb on most of the known world, including this region of the world. So Rome was oppressive. They had overthrown. As a result of Rome moving in and taking over, everything was a mess. The political climate, the religious climate, the social climate, everything was a mess. There was injustice, there was inequality, there was lack of resources, and everybody is responding differently to what's happening in and around them. Some people are just burying their head in the sand. And that's what some of us do when life falls apart. We want to just stay out of it, just kind of fly low under the radar and hope to draw no attention to ourselves. Some people are using religion as kind of their ability to step up or take control of the situation in a very broken, perverted way. This is, if you're familiar with the Bible, this is the story essentially of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, who their response to everything was to take what was pure and good about what God had given them as the leaders in the church, and they had actually warped it to something very selfish and self-centered. You had other people that had become essentially turncoats, particularly the tax collectors, people of the Jews who had turned on their own people, collecting taxes from them for Rome, and at the same time putting a little extra in their own pocket. But then you've got this one group of people who their response is different than all of that. Their response is the most aggressive response. They're the zealots. And the zealots were justifying all sorts of mayhem and destruction and anarchy and murder as a result of them saying, we're not going to stand for this and we're going to fight for our freedom. And that was their attempt to do this. Now, among the zealots, there was a whole group of them, but there was at least one particular one that had a reputation that preceded him. And his name was Barabbas. We also know that there was a recent uprising that Barabbas was a part of. Even some traditions put him as having led that uprising. We don't know for sure if he led it or was just involved in it. What we do know is that in it, his participation as a part of it led to him taking someone's life, at least one person. And so he's been captured as a result of it. And when you revolt against Rome, there's only one consequence, and that's death. And it's not just death by any means, it's death by crucifixion, something that the Romans, frankly, had become so good at, they literally turned it into an art form. It's like, what do you do as an artist? I paint pictures, I make sculptures, I crucify people. It was an art form to Rome. And so Barabbas has been tried, and he has been sentenced, and execution by crucifixion is what's waiting for him. But in this particular region, one of the things that's unique that happens on an annual basis is the release of a prisoner during the celebration of Passover. It's one of the ways that when the government moves in and takes everything away, they try to pacify you by giving a little something back. And so this is that moment, and all of this becomes kind of the historical scene that sheds just a little bit of light on, frankly, what is one of the shortest but most incredible encounters that takes place in the Bible. It's actually found in all four of the Gospels being the four books in the New Testament part of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that exclusively deal with Jesus and his life and his teachings. But I'm going to read for us out of the book of Luke, and I'm going to read several verses, so this will take a minute. So I'm going to sit in it with you. Luke chapter 23. Verse 1 is where we're going to go. Then the whole assembly arose and led him off to Pilate, him, Jesus. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. And then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for charge against this man." But they insisted. He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teachings. And he started in Galilee and has now come all the way here. And on hearing this, Pilate asked the man if he was a Galilean. And when he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he'd been wanting to see him. And from what he had heard about him, he had hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. And so he piled high his many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. And then Herod and the soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressing him in an elegant robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends before they had been enemies. Verse 13. Pilate called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, "You have brought this man to me who was inciting the people to rebellion, and I have examined him in your presence, and I have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he has sent him back to us, as you can see. He has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us." Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Remember, this is the group that a week earlier had cried out, "Hosanna, Hosanna." For the third time, he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I found no grounds for his death. Therefore, I will have him punished and released." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand, and he released this man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one that they had asked for. And they surrendered Jesus to their will. So you have to remember that this has already been an incredibly long night. Right? It began with the dinner that Jesus was at with his disciples that we saw a few weeks ago, as they were celebrating the Passover together, culminating in him in this humble moment, like flipping their whole world paradigm upside down, where he washed their feet as their God, became their servant, and said, "You do this as well." And then you have the moment of the garden where they go together to pray, and this long night where it's so long the disciples are already falling asleep and Jesus is in agony. Then there's the soldiers that come marching in. They take him captive. If you remember last week, there's Peter who lashes out, takes the ear off. Jesus heals the ear. I mean, all this is going on. This is a long night that's already taken place. And now here he is, captured and beaten, already seen multiple judges, and he's on trial. And the outcome of this trial, if he's found guilty, leads to execution. It leads to instant execution. And so you have to picture Jesus in this moment after everything that's now happened. He's exhausted, tired, like that tired that's way beyond just physical, where your soul just feels like it can't keep itself up, where his eyes are probably stained and burned with sweat and a mix of blood, where hair has probably begun to dry with crusted blood against parts of his face and his body, probably having to be held up because his physical strength and emotional strength is failing him at this point. And then standing next to him is somebody else, this Barabbas, who is equally in chains. The only difference that separates the two of them is that Barabbas' trial is already over. His verdict is already being handed down, and he's guilty. For Barabbas, death is no longer a possibility. It is a certainty. Barabbas is going to die. And then in this curveball moment, this option for one person to be released gets thrown at the crowd, who will become the deciding jury. And they need but a second to think about what to do, and they all cry out, "Release Barabbas and give us Jesus." And in that moment, and on that word, the chains that held Barabbas and assured him of his death now become the chains that hold Jesus and assure him of his. A couple years ago, I had the opportunity to spend a couple of days really at a blacksmith shop with a local blacksmith right here in the area, and just listen to his trait and listen to him explain to me what he does to shape iron into something beautiful as well as even something harmful and dangerous. And so much of what this guy, Owen, the blacksmith, shared with me, I thought was so poignant to what it is we're talking about today and the power of chains and iron and the one who ultimately wields them and works them. So for the next couple minutes, I just want you to meet Owen and listen to his story.
Iron. It's one of the most common things on our planet. Matter of fact, iron makes up much of the Earth's inner and outer core. And yet, for all of its commonness, iron can be crafted into some of the most intricate and beautiful pieces of art. I was recently able to visit a blacksmith shop, and I met Owen, a master blacksmith, and I spent some time watching him work his craft that he's been developing for nearly 40 years now. And Owen was quick to show me several pieces of his work. Some of them were custom orders, and others were proud remakes of period pieces, and others were more personal works that he was crafting for people that he knew and he loved. And as I looked at all of his work, it made me quickly begin to think about how the Bible refers to us as pieces of clay, and it describes us as works of art being crafted by a master's hands. I wouldn't bet that most of us feel like we're a work of art, though. I mean, even while I watched Owen work his magic, it was more fierce and aggressive than anything else. It was a combination of intense heat, pounding, forceful twisting, and at times it looked more like he was beating the iron than he was shaping it. And it wasn't obvious for quite some time that his force wasn't destructive, but in fact was the very thing that was helping this raw iron become something strong and beautiful. The more I thought about this, the more I noticed that every single piece that he had created, even the same pieces, were different. It's kind of that personal touch of the craftsman's hands that gives those subtle differences, and Owen then assured me that it's these small details that assure that no two pieces are the same, and that no two pieces take the same amount of time to craft either. Made me wonder if maybe we don't realize the beauty of God's masterwork in us. And maybe we don't sometimes because we're mistaking his work, which frankly can feel like heat and pounding and twisting, and mistaking that for him being destructive or unloving, when in fact he's turning our rawness into something strong and beautiful. Or maybe we're comparing ourselves to others too much and overlooking the fact that our differences are our beauty. Or maybe it's because we expect that our beauty should be crafted in the same time frame as somebody else, when in fact the master is simply taking more time at our details. Even calling these pieces of iron art beauty seemed almost strange. I mean, they were dark in color, they were hard, cold, even dirty to the touch, but as Owen worked his craft, all I could think was, incredible. And when he finished, all I could say, beautiful. The Bible actually tells us that God not only works in us, but that in his time frame, he will finish that work. Incredible. Beautiful. At one point, I even asked Owen what his favorite thing was about being a blacksmith, and his answer was that I've been able to raise my 2 daughters doing this. Now, I found it interesting that in 40 years of this, and in a room full of his works of art, that was his answer. And that's when it hit me that I think the work of a master craftsman is always about more than his craft, but it's about how his craft allows him to enhance the lives of the people he loves. I mean, his daughters could walk into that room and look at every piece he's made, or every piece over 40 years, no matter who owns them now, and they could say and think to themselves, he did all of this for me. 2,000 years ago, a blacksmith forged a set of rings that became the chains that imprisoned a man named Barabbas. Chains that in his strength he was powerless to break. Chains that many of us know all too well. I mean, they may not be made of iron, but we know what it's like to be confined and restrained and in a place in life that we wish we weren't. A place that our strongest efforts have been powerless to free us from. A place where we need the work of a master craftsman who can break our chains.
So I want us to take a minute, and I want us to try and picture Barabbas. I asked Matthias to switch up his role for a minute from worship leader to visual aid. So Matthias, if you help me out here. So it's not every day your boss asks you if you would let him wrap you up in chains. So we're gonna wrap you up for a minute here. I want you to just picture Matthias as Barabbas for a minute. And Barabbas, what he must have been feeling in these moments where he's got these heavy weights and chains on him. Hey, by the way, this is actually an intervention. We need to talk about your job performance. That's not an illustration. So you've got this moment where you have this man, Barabbas, chained up. And again, remember, the difference between him and Jesus standing there is that Jesus is still in trial. Barabbas' trial is done. This man knows death is not an option. Death is not a maybe. Death is a certainty. I'm going to die for what I've done. And there's no getting out of this. He's powerless for this. And then you have this moment where you're hearing the crowd start to shout your name. Not Jesus' name, your name, Barabbas. And then this moment where the authority in charge looks over at you and says, you're free to go. And then he gives kind of the nod you can imagine to the soldiers, probably at Barabbas' side, who start to unlock the chains maybe around his wrist. You can imagine a moment where maybe he even rubs his wrists. And a moment where maybe when those chains begin to fall away, where he even possibly steps and then wonders if this is a joke. You're kind of looking back and wondering if this is a trick, but the soldiers aren't following. So he takes another step and the soldiers still aren't following. And now he's into just full pace and he's moving away. And as he moves away, the only reason he can is because his chains are gone, and his chains are gone because someone else took them. But the someone else that took them now is Jesus. Thanks, Matthias. But here's the thing I want you to remember, and I want us to realize about this moment in this passage. Actually, Matthias, I set my Bible down back there. Can you grab it for me? Thank you. Is that sometimes when we tell the story and we relive it and we sit in it, is that we put the focus all on the crowd being the reason that Jesus is now bound. The reason that Barabbas, thanks, dude, is now unbound. The problem with putting all the focus on the crowd and saying the only reason that Jesus is now in chains is because the crowd called for it, and the only reason that Barabbas is free is because the crowd called for it, and giving all the authority to the crowd is that it paints this picture, mentally or emotionally even, in us that Jesus is this poor victim of his circumstances. Almost this picture in our minds of Jesus kind of just sad and sullen and kind of hunched over and sad face staring down at the ground, victim of his circumstances. But here's the problem with that. In this moment, Jesus is not a poor victim. He is a willing replacement. And had Jesus been given a vote like the crowd, here's what I absolutely believe. His vote would have been for Barabbas to go free because he loved Barabbas. And here's the incredible thing about this story, is that in this moment where Jesus is undergoing this horrifically unfair treatment, so is Barabbas. Barabbas was being treated horribly unfair because here's what fair would have been: to suffer the consequences of his decision. Whether or not that should have led to an execution, there should have been some consequences. The rebellion, the murder, fair would have been, you did the crime, now there's consequences. Unfair is that he was given freedom instead of punishment, that he was given release. Sometimes this is a story that's referred to as the Great Exchange. And I think it is an unmissable story when we want to understand what it is that God has ultimately done for us in Christ, in the crucifixion, and ultimately in the resurrection. Like, I don't want us to miss what it is that Jesus went through and felt. But nor do I want us to miss in this story and in this account what it is that he accomplished in his beating, accomplished in his trial, accomplished in his execution, and accomplished ultimately in his resurrection. Because what he accomplished for Barabbas is what he accomplished for us, was an invitation to all humanity to step into freedom and away from our chains. The Apostle Paul, who later on in the scriptures would come to faith in Jesus after being a persecutor of the Christian church, would write this to a church he started in Corinth in 2 Corinthians. Chapter 5, verse 7, Paul says this: "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. And the old has gone and the new is here. And all of this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God,
was reconciling the world to himself in Christ. This is it, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. So we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. This is the great unfairness of that story. Not just that Jesus was treated unfair, but that in his unfair treatment, he offers for us to unfairly be treated, which is the greatest story of the Bible. Because the unfair treatment he offers to us is love in place of condemnation, is grace instead of punishment, is mercy instead of our own chains. So he became our guilt so we could become his innocence. He became our death so we could become his life. He became our chains so that we could become his freedom. And I think in this exchange between Barabbas and Jesus, it's not just meant to show us something about Jesus and Barabbas, but about Jesus and you and I. But there's something that could so easily get lost about the power of all of this exchange that takes place in understanding Barabbas' name. And maybe some of you know this, but maybe some of you don't. And this, a number of years ago, was something new to me, even though I'd spent most of my life growing up in the church. It helped me understand something so much more beautiful and at such a deeper level about this story. So Barabbas' name, it's two parts, Bar and Abbas. So Bar is a prefix, like a lot of names. So my name, my last name, McGlasson, MC, Glassion. The MC is a prefix. And so at a time in history where you didn't have last names that distinguished one Bob from another Bob, the way that you would determine who you were and your identity was to have a prefix that would point to who your father was. So the prefix here, Bar, means son of. So if you were to kind of apply Barabbas' name and the idea of the prefix it would point to in his culture who you were the father of to my name, it might mean that at one point, maybe my name, Mick, MC, meant son of Glasson. And so you've got this guy, Barabbas, Bar, son of. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Abbas, it's a form of a pretty common way to refer to a father in his culture and in his time. So here's what his name literally means, son of a father. But what's interesting is it's no specific father. It's just a father. So he has a father, but we don't know who his father is. It'd be like you and I having kids and not giving them our last name. Like, who does that? But this is what's happened. And so Barabbas might as well have been named unwanted, alone, unloved, uncared for, bastard, because he's the son of an unnamed father. He has a dad who didn't care enough to identify himself with him. And here's what's amazing, is that you have Barabbas, the son of some father, an unnamed father, standing next to Jesus, who the Bible repeatedly refers to as the son of the Father. The Father of all light and all life and all goodness and all grace, the Father of creation. You literally have this moment of one man chained, guilty, and fatherless, and another man chained, innocent, whose father is God himself. And in this exchange, although we don't know what Barabbas did in the days following this moment, what Jesus made available to Barabbas is what he made available to every single one of us, is that Barabbas could walk away from this moment and no longer be the son of no father, but be the son of the Father, the Father in heaven, the Father God of all creation. As one pastor, Judah Smith, puts it, the Father in heaven had to treat Jesus like Barabbas so that he could ultimately treat Barabbas like Jesus. This is the greatest unfairness of the Bible, that God has taken our place, that Jesus took our chains so that his Father could become our Father. And I think if we don't understand some of the nature of who Barabbas was, I think we potentially miss some of the nature of what God has done for all of us. Because consider this, the starting point of relationship for God, not just with Barabbas, but for every single one of us and all in creation who have, do, and will ever exist, the starting place is forgiveness. Like, that's not where he gets to eventually. Like, all of us, if you stay in a relationship long enough, you get there. where forgiveness is necessary. God starts there with us. So imagine yourself starting a brand new relationship. Maybe it's a blind date, you get together, you're sitting at the table, but at the onset of that relationship, for it to go any further and actually become a relationship, the person across the table has to present to you all the offenses they will ever create in relationship with you and anyone else. All the small ones, all the great ones, even horrific ones. And to begin the relationship requires from you at that moment to forgive everything. Like, how many of you are doing that? You're like, yeah, no thanks. You're like, you know what, I could forgive most of that, but oh man, 4 years from now, that? Yeah, there's no way I'm forgiving that. This is the starting point in relationship with Jesus. Where to all the unfairness he suffered, where to all the abuse and all the mistreatment, he does not pick up a club to attack back, he picks up a cross to forgive with. How could we as his followers do any less than offer that same forgiveness as well? This is where Jesus' humanity can't just draw us in with love and affection for him. It has to influence and inform our own humanity. Like, who does he call us to then be as his followers? And I would just tell you this, I think he calls us to be those who embrace that our chains are gone and then also release the chains of others indebted to us. That's why we see this theme all throughout the scriptures, that he calls us to not just be the forgiven, but to be the forgivers. And here's the thing about forgiveness. We could take a whole series and talk about forgiveness. I just want to give you two quick qualifiers to bring it to a close this morning. One is what forgiveness does not mean and does not do, because I think when we start thinking forgiveness, we think all kinds of weird things sometimes. So for example, forgiveness, here's what it does not mean. It does not mean that it requires an apology from somebody who's hurt us. I think forgiveness is ultimately about a posture of our heart, not a confession of someone else's mouth. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we have to get an apology. I remember somebody telling me years ago that you don't have to forgive something unless somebody apologizes. And I'm like, that's the weirdest thing. And I remember he told me that in reference to somebody who had deeply hurt me. And so for a minute, I believed it because I wanted to believe it. Until I had to come face to face with the fact that even on the cross, Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. His forgiveness didn't come on the other side of a request for it. It came before the request. It's where it starts. That's where he begins with us. Forgiveness also doesn't mean that you have to go have a confrontation. Sometimes we think that if we're going to be those who loose the chains from others, we have to go confront them first with what they did. Maybe there might be a moment for that. There's a healthy way to do that. Matthew 18 even talks about a healthy way to have confrontation. But sometimes the person that we need to forgive is gone. Or sometimes they have done such horrific things that it would just be unwise to even be in their presence. It doesn't necessitate a confrontation. Again, it's a posture of our heart. Here's what forgiveness also doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that we're the innocent victim. Sometimes when we're willing to offer forgiveness, somehow it translates in our minds to a higher position and posture. Like at least we're better. We're the victim here, and that's not always true. Sometimes forgiveness needs to be an equal moment. But God would call you as one who has lost your chains to make the first move to remove the chains from somebody else. And here's what I've also learned, as have you. Forgiveness rarely feels really good. Because here's what I think forgiveness ultimately is. If I am to honestly say, Jesus, you are my God, and I will follow in the wake of your walk, may your dust be on my face, then here's what I have to own. Forgiveness is where I choose to lose. It's where I believe that I have both the mandate and the power to do what has been done for me with those indebted to me, is to release them of their chains. And the reason that doesn't always feel good is because it's a moment where I choose to lose for the sake of my King who lost for me, who lost for us. Which is why here's just the one statement that has been very driving for me for some time now about forgiveness. And I think it's so perfect and fitting for this morning. Forgiveness is this. It is you and I choosing to lose because embracing unfairness becomes the pathway to freedom. When we embrace unfairness, it becomes a pathway to freedom for ourselves, to be loosed from bitterness, and the freedom to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, to say, he who took my chains, I will model that and release you of yours. So a friend of mine gave me something recently, actually about 2 years ago, that I keep in multiple places. It's on my phone. It's on the backside of my door. So every morning when I walk in and hang my coat, I have to look at it. It's in front of my computer because this is how much I need to be reminded of this. I don't know who created this. The author is unknown, but it's a series of statements that really sum up what it means for you and I to die to ourselves, like our God did for us. And I'm going to give these to you this morning on the screen and even encourage you as these come up on slides to take pictures. There's going to be 2 slides. There's 7 of these statements. And here's what I'd love to do just to finish with you this morning. I'm going to read the statement and then ask you when I get to the end to say that last phrase, that is dying to self. Let's practice really quick. Say, that is dying to self. All right, here we go. When you are forgotten or neglected and you don't hurt with the insult, but your heart is happy. When your advice is disregarded, your opinions ridiculed, and you refuse to let anger rise in your heart and take it all in patience, loving silence. When you lovingly and patiently bear disorder, irregularity, tardiness, and annoyance, and endure it as Jesus endured it. When you never care to refer to yourself in conversation or record your own good works or itch for praise after an accomplishment, when you can truly love to be unknown. When you can see your brother or sister prosper and can honestly rejoice with them and feel no envy even though your needs are greater. When you are content with any food, any offering, any raiment, any climate, or any society. And one more. When you can take correction, when you can humbly submit inwardly as well as outwardly, with no rebellion or resentment rising up in your heart. One last time. The unfairness of God was not just that he allowed himself treated to the cross, but that in doing so, he treated us beautifully unfair by removing our chains as his followers. How, and I ask myself this, how could I do any less than be a chain remover myself?
When I was your foe, still your love fought for me, yeah. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me, yeah. You have been so, so kind to me. on, you sing it. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Just you, come on. There's no wall, yeah, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, there's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No, 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 no. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases and it fights till, oh, it leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. The sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I
So good. So next week is Easter, and we're gonna pull out all the stops and celebrate. But here's what I hope you come prepared to do is more than just celebrate, but invite. There are people you know right now, and maybe some of them you know them really well, and maybe some of them you know them more at a peripheral, but there are people that have been divinely placed in your life, that you would be the invitation, as we read from Paul earlier, that you would be the voice saying, be reconciled to God, that you would be the voice inviting to Jesus. And so next week, I'm hoping that you've got some people, whether you're inviting them online, whether you're inviting them here to one of our services, that you're inviting and you're not just thinking, how do I celebrate? You're thinking, how do I make sure that everybody around me knows that there is a God? His name is Jesus, and he is wildly affectionate about all of us. So get your friends, get your family. I don't care if they're online at another campus. I don't care if they're at another church. Get them next Sunday to hear the message that there really is an empty tomb that under his own authority and power, Jesus walked out of and conquered on our behalf. Before you walk out of here this morning, if we can love on you by listening, serving you through prayer, there's a team that's here to do that. They're directly back here. If you go to where the doors are open and the lights coming out, that's where you'll find them. So let us do that for you. Otherwise, we're so glad you were here with us this morning. We cannot wait to celebrate with you on Good Friday and Easter and all of next week. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.